October 26, 1958. A Boeing 707 lifts off from New York and turns east toward Paris. 111 passengers. 8 hours in the air. Somewhere on the ocean beneath its flight path. The fastest passenger ship ever built is making the very same crossing. She will need 3.5 days. Within 12 months, more people will cross the Atlantic by air than by sea, and they will never go back. The airline flying that route is American World Airways. It is about to become the most recognized company on Earth, and in 33 years, it will not exist at all. Juan Trippe was not a pilot by trade, and he was not an engineer. He was a Yale-educated former Navy flyer who understood something almost nobody else in aviation understood yet. The airplane was not a novelty. It was infrastructure. In 1927, Trippe founded American Airways to fly mail, and eventually, passengers from Key West to Havana. It was a modest beginning for a company that would come to define what international air travel looked like for half a century. Trippe's real genius was not in the cockpit. It was in the negotiating room. While other airline founders worried about engines, Trippe secured exclusive landing rights across entire regions of Latin America before his competitors understood there was anything worth negotiating for. By the early 1930s, Pan Am's flying boats, branded clippers after the great sailing ships of the previous century, were the only way to reach much of the Caribbean and Central America by air. In 1935, Trippe attempted something no airline and arguably no company had ever attempted. He wanted to fly passengers across the entire Pacific Ocean, a distance no aircraft of the era could cross without refueling. There were no airports on the way, so Pan Am built its own. Engineers and construction crews shipped fuel, hotel supplies, and radio equipment to Midway, Wake, and Guam, essentially uninhabited atolls in the middle of the ocean, and built refueling stations from nothing. The China Clipper flying boat made the survey crossing that same year, landing at each new station in sequence. Pan Am was not simply operating an airline. It was building the physical infrastructure of global air travel before any government thought to. By the end of the 1930s, the Boeing 314, the Yankee Clipper, carried passengers across both the Atlantic and the Pacific in private sleeping berths, with a full dining saloon, for a fare that cost roughly the price of a new car. Flying was not transportation yet. It was still the ocean liner's luxury, just airborne. By the mid-1950s, both Pan Am and the British carrier Boeing were racing to be first across the Atlantic. With a jet engine, Pan Am lost that race. On October 4, 1958, Boeing's de Havilland Comet 4 became the first jet airliner to carry passengers across the Atlantic, beating Pan Am to the milestone by 3 weeks. It was not the airline's finest moment, and Pan Am's own marketing had promised to be first. But 3 weeks would not matter. On October 26, 1958, Pan Am launched its own scheduled jet service, flying a Boeing 707 from New York to Paris with 111 passengers and 12 crew aboard. The flight took just over 8 hours. It was not the fastest jet in the sky. It was simply the jet with the fleet size and the route network to make flying the ocean the default choice within a single year, rather than a novelty. Strip the paint off the 707, and what remains is a formula so durable that almost every airliner since has copied it. A pressurized aluminum tube, a wing swept back so the air over it stays subsonic even as the aircraft pushes toward the speed of sound, and 4 turbojets slung in pods beneath that wing, hung away from the fuselage so a fire or a failure stays outside the cabin, and so each engine can be replaced without touching the airframe. It was not the first jet airliner. It was the first one that made economic sense. The math was brutal and immediate. A liner crossing took 3.5 days and required a crew approaching 1,000. A 707 crossed in 8 hours with a crew of 12, and could make the trip and turn around several times in the time a single liner voyage took. This was not a slow erosion of the passenger ship business. It was a cliff. At the end of 1958, for the first time in history, more people crossed the Atlantic by airplane than by ship. It had taken exactly 1 year from Pan Am's first jet flight for the balance to tip permanently. The great ocean liners, including the SS United States, would spend the next decade fighting a battle they had already lost the year it began. The SS United States would not be withdrawn from service until 1969, 11 years after that crossover, but the outcome was already decided the moment the 707 proved it could fill its seats reliably. Every ocean liner still crossing the Atlantic after 1958 was, in a sense, already retired. It just had not stopped moving yet. By the mid-1960s, Trippe wanted an airplane that did not exist yet. Something dramatically larger than anything flying, capable of moving passengers in volumes that would make his existing jets look small. In April of 1966, he personally pushed Boeing to build it and committed Pan Am to 25 aircraft at roughly $20 million each. The plane had not flown a single test hour. Trippe had simply ordered the future into existence and dared Boeing to catch up. The scale of the bet is easiest to see in a single number. When Pan Am opened the jet age in 1958, its 707 crossed to Paris with 111 people aboard. When the 747 entered service 12 years later, it carried 335 on a single crossing. Trippe had not ordered a bigger airplane. He had ordered a different economics of flight, one where the cost of a seat fell far enough that ordinary people could afford the ocean. 25 aircraft at $20 million apiece. $500 million committed to a plane that was still a set of engineering drawings. To build it, Boeing constructed the largest building in the world by volume in Everett, Washington, a factory so large it reportedly generated its own weather inside. The gamble paid off in January of 1970. The scheduled inaugural flight was delayed a day by mechanical trouble in the original aircraft, so a backup jet, quickly renamed Clipper Young America, carried 335 passengers and 20 crew from New York to London on January 22nd. It was, at the time, the largest passenger airplane ever to fly a commercial route. Pan Am had done what the ocean liners once did. It had made the impossible feel routine. For 50 years, Pan Am had operated almost entirely as an international carrier, with a tacit blessing of the United States government, but without the protected domestic route network American law gave its rivals. That arrangement was fine as long as the rules stayed the same. In 1978, they did not. The Airline Deregulation Act ended government control over domestic routes and fares. Airlines with large existing domestic networks could now funnel connecting passengers directly into their international flights. Pan Am, after half a century flying overseas, had no domestic network to feed its own airplanes. Pan Am spent the next decade trying to build or buy what it had never needed before. In 1980, it acquired National Airlines to get a domestic network at last. The merger was troubled, and the debt it created never really went away. To keep flying, Pan Am began selling the very things Trippe had spent a career building. In 1985, it sold its Pacific division, the network of routes born from those refueling stations on empty islands 50 years earlier, to United Airlines for $750 million. In December of 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 was destroyed over Lockerbie, Scotland, killing 270 people. The tragedy compounded an airline already carrying more debt than it could support. 3 years later, after a failed rescue attempt backed by Delta Airlines, American World Airways ceased all operations on December 4th, 1991. It had flown for 64 years. 64 years! From a mail run between Key West and Havana to fuel depots on empty Pacific atolls, to the jet that ended the ocean liner, to the largest passenger airplane the world had ever seen. And then, in less than a decade, gone. The sign came down from the top of the Pan Am building in 1992, replaced within months. For nearly 30 years, it had been visible across the Manhattan skyline, a landmark as recognizable as the airline itself. The building remained. The name did not. It is, in its way, the same ending as the SS United States, tied up at a Philadelphia pier, rusting quietly while the world moves on. Different machine, same forgetting. Pan Am ended the age of the ocean liner, and then the world ended Pan Am the same way. Is there a company you remember that built the modern world and then vanished from it? Tell us in the comments. If you have not seen our film on the SS United States, the ship whose era Pan Am ended, it is the natural companion to this one. Until next time, respect the engineers who built the world you inherited.